She threw it into the driveway, like it was garbage day. My walker hit the concrete, bounced once, and landed wheels up against my stepfather's truck tire. And my sister stood on the porch, with her arms crossed, like she'd just taken out the trash. "Maybe if you weren't so dramatic about needing help," she said, "you'd actually get better." I was 31 years old, sitting on the bottom porch step because my legs would not carry me across a driveway. And I watched the one thing that let me leave a room on my own roll to a stop in the gravel. Here is what my sister did not know that afternoon. 4 years earlier, our mother had been handed $240,000 in a structured settlement. Money that belonged to me. Money meant for wheelchairs and ramps and physical therapy after the accident that took the use of my legs. By the time my walker hit that driveway, less than $19,000 of it was left, and every receipt my mother had filed to account for the rest was going to turn out to be a lie. I did not know that yet either. Not the shape of it, not the size of it, but I knew enough to start looking. Today, I am a certified fraud examiner who specializes in exactly this kind of theft. The kind that hides inside families. The kind that wears the word trustee like a badge. 9 months ago, I opened a file with my own name on it, and I did not close it until my mother sat across a conference table from an investigator and signed a confession she could not walk back. My name is Wren Callahan. I am 34 years old now, and if you have ever been the person your family called difficult for asking where the money went, stay with me, because the most honest object in that whole ugly story turned out to be a walker somebody threw away, like trash. And it was about to become the thing that held my whole case up. I will tell you how we got there. It was a Tuesday, the 11th of April, 7:42 a.m. I remember the time because I looked at the microwave clock in my mother's kitchen, right before I picked up that walker off the driveway gravel and folded it. My hands shaking not from the cold, but from something closer to relief. I had been living in my mother's house for 4 years by then, in the downstairs room that used to be my stepfather's office, because I could not afford my own accessible apartment. And my mother had told me, more than once, that family took care of family. I believed her. That is the part that still sits wrong in my chest. Not that she lied, but that I believed her for so long. The walker had a bent left wheel guard from hitting the tire, and a long white scratch down the frame that I never fixed. Because I decided somewhere on that drive to my friend Priya's apartment with everything I owned, in the back seat of a borrowed car, that I was going to keep the scratch. I did not know yet that it would end up matched, tread pattern and all, to a photograph in a court filing 8 months later. I only knew I was done asking my sister Kayla to please, not touch my things. There is only the counting. I counted 2 duffel bags, 1 medical file box, 1 folding walker with a bent wheel guard, 17 years of family. And that is what fit in the car. The trigger scene deserves the full, slow version, because everything after it only makes sense. Once you have stood in that driveway with me, it started at breakfast. My mother, Diane, had been unusually short with me for 2 days, ever since I'd asked her, gently, whether I could see the year-end statement from the settlement account. The one her financial advisor was supposed to send every January. She told me the advisor was behind on paperwork. She told me it was rude to ask about money at the table. She told me, and I want you to hear exactly how she phrased it, "Everything I do for your own good." I did not know it yet, but I was going to hear that sentence so many times over the next 4 years that it would stop sounding like love and start sounding like a lock clicking shut. That morning, Kayla came downstairs already dressed for a job interview she did not get, and she was in one of her moods, the kind where she needed somebody smaller than her to be wrong about something. She found me at the bottom of the stairs, trying to get my walker unfolded, because the ramp my stepfather had promised to build in the garage still, 4 years later, did not exist. You take forever, she said. You always take forever. It is like everything has to be about your legs. I did not answer. I have learned, the hard way, that answering Kayla in the morning only bought me a longer version of the same conversation. What I did not expect was for her to grab the walker out of my hands. She did not do it to help me. She did it to make a point. The kind of point people make when they have decided somebody else's needs are actually a performance. She carried it out the front door, and I followed as fast as I could, which was not fast, dragging myself along the hallway wall. And by the time I reached the porch, she had already thrown it, not dropped it. Thrown it. The way you throw something you resent, two-handed, from the top step, so it would land hard enough to matter. That was shock one. The physical fact of it, the sound of aluminum on concrete that I still hear sometimes in dreams. Shock two came 20 minutes later, when I was sitting in the gravel trying to breathe normally, and my mother came out to the porch, saw the walker on its side, saw me on the ground, and said, "Ren, honey, don't make a scene," before turning around and going back inside to finish her coffee. Not, "Are you hurt?" Not, "Kayla, that was wrong." Don't make a scene. 4 years of that sentence. In different clothes. Every single time. Shock 3 is the one that still gets me. Because it did not come from Kayla or my mother. It came from inside my own memory. Standing there in that driveway. When I finally let myself add something up that I had been refusing to add up for years. I thought about the settlement, $240,000, awarded when I was 27. After the drunk driver who hit my car left me unable to walk without support, I thought about how, 4 years in, my mother still controlled every dollar of it as trustee. How I had never once been shown a full accounting. How every time I asked, the subject changed to my attitude, instead of her arithmetic. If you have ever felt something click into place at the exact wrong moment, in the exact wrong driveway, you know what that third shock feels like. It feels like the ground opening up under a house. You thought was solid. I picked up my walker. I folded it myself, badly, with hands that would not stop shaking, and I left. I want to walk you through 4 incidents, not in the order they happen by the calendar, but in the order that matters, because each one is a rung, and each one is going to come back later, heavier than it started. The first rung is the invoice for a ramp that was never built, 11 months before the driveway. I found a receipt in a kitchen drawer. While looking for stamps, it was from a contractor, dated the previous September, for $4,100. Description line reading: wheelchair accessibility ramp, materials and labor, rear entrance. There was no ramp. There has never been a ramp at that house. When I asked my mother about it, she told me the contractor had canceled, and she'd get a refund, and I let it go, because I did not yet understand that a refund that never arrives is just a theft with better manners. I want you to remember that number, $4,100. It matters later. The second rung is the physical therapy that stopped, and the bills that did not. I was supposed to have 2 sessions a week with a specialist named Dr. Osei, who had gotten me from a wheelchair to a walker over 18 months of work. I am prouder of than almost anything else in my life. In the spring of my 2nd year in that house, my mother told me the sessions were getting too expensive, that the settlement fund was running low, that I needed to switch to a cheaper clinic across town. I did. What I did not know until much later is that the settlement account was billed that same spring and for 2 years after, for physical therapy sessions. at Dr. Assay's clinic that I never attended. $1,200 a month, submitted under my name, with a signature that was not mine. The third rung is my birthday, the one where I finally asked the wrong question out loud. I had just turned 30. I asked my mother, in front of Kayla, and my stepfather, whether we could sit down together and go through the settlement paperwork, all of it, so I would understand where things stood. My mother's face did something I had never seen it do before. A kind of stillness that was worse than anger. She said we would talk about it when things calmed down. Kayla laughed, actually laughed, and said, "God, Ren, it is always something with you." Nobody at that table asked what it was. Nobody ever did. The fourth rung is the day I found. The second signature, 6 weeks before the driveway, filing some old mail. I found a letter from the bank confirming a $15,000 withdrawal from the settlement trust, authorized. The letter said, by my signature, I have signed my name enough times in my life to know my own handwriting. And that was not it. The W leaned the wrong way. The loop on the Y was closed, instead of open. I did not confront anyone that day. I photographed the letter with my phone, and I started, very quietly, to plan. If you have ever felt yourself becoming a stranger to the people who raised you, one small withheld sentence at a time, that is exactly what those 4 rungs felt like. Climbing up out of a life I used to trust. I need to tell you about the one person who made all of this survivable. Because without her, I am not sure I would have had the nerve to open the file. I eventually opened. Priya Nair had been my roommate for 1 semester in college, years before the accident. And we had stayed loosely in touch. The way people do, birthday texts, and the occasional call. When I showed up at her apartment that Tuesday morning with 2 duffel bags and a bent walker, she did not ask me a single question. She just held the door open wider and said, "Your room's the one with the good light." That was it. That was the whole conversation. Priya was a paralegal at a firm that handled elder and dependent adult financial abuse cases, which I did not fully appreciate the significance of until months later. What she gave me, in that first week, was not advice. It was space. She let me cry exactly once. On the second night, sitting on her kitchen floor, because I did not trust myself to make it to the couch, and she did not try to fix it. She just sat down on the floor next to me, and after a long while, she said the one line I have carried with me every day since. You don't owe anyone access to you just because they share your blood. I have never forgotten that sentence. I do not think I ever will. I am not going to walk you through every month of the next 3 years, because most of it was not dramatic. It was just work, the unglamorous kind that nobody makes a movie about. But here is the shape of it. Fast, the way it actually felt, from the inside. I got a job answering phones at a small accounting firm, because it was the only place within accessible transit distance that would hire me with a gap in my resume and a walker by the desk. I studied at night. I failed the first fraud examiner exam module by 6 points and took it again 11 weeks later and passed. I moved twice, each apartment a little more accessible than the last, until I landed one with a roll-in shower and a doorway wide enough for a proper wheelchair. On the days my legs needed the extra help, I stopped answering my mother's calls on the first ring, then stopped answering most of them at all. Kayla texted me things like, "Mom's really hurt you are doing this," and I stopped reading past the first line. I got a promotion. I got licensed. I got, slowly, a spine that did not apologize for existing. Somewhere in there, without ever deciding to, I became the kind of person who reads a bank statement the way other people read a novel, looking for the sentence that does not belong. 2 years after the driveway, I had my certification, a caseload of my own, and something I had been quietly building the entire time without telling a single person outside of Priya. A file. My file, on my own family, built the exact same way I would have built it on a stranger, because that is the only way it would ever hold up, and because some part of me needed to prove, mostly to myself, that I was not exaggerating, that this had actually happened. Stay with me here, because this is where it changes. I filed a formal request with the Settlement Trusts Bank, the same institution that had held the account since I was 27, asking for a full transaction history under my legal right as the trust's named beneficiary. It took 11 weeks and 2 follow-up letters, but it came, 43 pages. I read every line, twice. The first page I want to show you is the ramp. The contractor my mother had paid $4,100 turned out to have gone out of business 8 months before the invoice date. I called the number on the invoice. It rang through to a dry cleaner in a town 40 minutes away that had never heard of a construction company by that name. The second page is the physical therapy. 26 months of billing from Dr. Osei's clinic. $1,200 a month, adding up to $31,200. I called the clinic myself and asked for my own patient file. They had no record of me after the month I switched to the cheaper clinic across town, which meant every single one of those 26 charges was submitted for services that never happened. The third page is the $15,000 withdrawal with my forged signature, the one with the wrong-leaning W. I had it compared formally by a certified document examiner, a colleague of a colleague who did handwriting analysis for insurance fraud cases. Her report was 2 pages long and said, in the careful language these reports always use, that the signature showed inconsistent pressure patterns and stroke direction, inconsistent with the 17 known exemplars of my signature provided for comparison. In plain language, it was not me. The fourth page is the one that took the longest to build, and it is the one I am proudest of, because it is where my whole life's second half finally paid the first half back. I requested and received a full ledger of every disbursement from the trust across 7 years, all $240,000 of it, and I built a spreadsheet, the same way I build one for every case at work, categorizing every line as documented, questionable, or fraudulent. When I finished, the total in the fraudulent column was $112,400. I ran the math 3 separate times because I did not trust myself to believe it the first time. $112,400, taken in small enough pieces, spread across 7 years, that no single withdrawal ever looked large enough on its own to raise a flag. That is not an accident. That is a method, and I recognized the method because by then I had spent 2 years catching other people who used it. If you have ever done math on a piece of paper hoping you were wrong, and then done it again hoping the second time would be different, you know exactly the kind of quiet that fills a room when the second answer matches the first. Let me do the calculation properly, the way I would for a client, because the numbers deserve to be said out loud and correctly. The ramp that was never built, $4,100. The therapy that never happened, $1,200 a month for 26 months, which is $31,200. The forged $15,000 withdrawal, plus 6 smaller forged withdrawals discovered later in the ledger, ranging from $800 to $6,000 each, totaling an additional $22,100. Add those 3 categories together, 4,100 plus 31,200 plus 22,100, and you get $57,400 in transactions I could trace to a specific lie, a specific document, a specific date. The rest of the $112,400 came from smaller, harder to individually prove withdrawals, cash advances, and transfers into an account that turned out to belong to my stepfather, that together still reconciled. Dollar for dollar, against 7 years of bank statements. I want to be precise about something, because precision is the whole reason any of this worked. I did not break a single rule. To get this file, I did not access anything I was not legally entitled to as the named beneficiary of that trust. I did not record a call without consent, or hack an account, or lie to a single institution. Every document I have came through a formal request, a legal right, a paper trail that anyone could follow behind me and find exactly what I found. That is not luck. That is the only kind of case I have ever believed in building. I did not scream. I want to tell you that up front, because I know some part of you might be waiting for the moment. I finally let it out. The confrontation where 4 years of silence turns into something loud. That moment does not come. What comes instead is a conference room, a folder, and a series of numbered statements. I had rehearsed enough times that my voice did not shake once. I asked my mother and Kayla to meet me at a neutral location, a small conference room at the accounting firm where I worked. On a Thursday afternoon, I did not tell them why. My mother thought, I later found out, that I wanted to reconcile. Kayla came. Because my mother made her, I sat across from them with the folder closed in front of me, and I said 5 things. In this order. 1. I requested a full accounting of the settlement trust from the bank directly, using my legal right as beneficiary. I watched my mother's face when I said, directly, because she understood immediately that she had not been the one to hand it over. 2. The trust shows $112,400 in withdrawals that do not correspond to any service I received or authorized. I opened the folder to the first page and turned it to face them. I did not raise my voice. 3. $15,000 of that was withdrawn using a forged signature. I had it independently examined by a certified document analyst. I placed the analyst's report on top of the first page. 4. I am not asking you to explain this to me tonight. I have already reported it to the state's Adult Protective and Financial Exploitation Division, along with the bank's internal fraud unit, because a licensed trustee misusing a beneficiary's settlement funds is a reportable offense. And I am a mandated reporter in my own profession. This was the sentence that changed the temperature in the room. My mother went very still. The same stillness from my 30th birthday. Except this time, I recognized it for what it was. 5. I am telling you this in person once, because you are my mother and my sister, and I did not want you to hear it first from a caseworker. That was the only sentence in the whole meeting that had anything soft in it, and I meant every word of it. And it did not change a single thing about what happened next. My mother did not deny it. That is the detail that still surprises me most. Months later, she looked at the folder for a long time and then said quietly, I was going to pay it back. I did not answer that. Some silences are their own answer. Kayla, for her part, said almost nothing until she was halfway out the door, when she turned around and said, You are really doing this to your own mother, as if the thing being done was the folder, and not the 7 years that filled it. I did not cry in that room. I did not cry in the elevator, or the parking garage, or the drive home. I cried exactly once. That night, alone in my car outside my own apartment. Engine off, hands on the wheel, for maybe 4 minutes. And then I went inside and made dinner, because I had learned the hard way that grief and function can occupy the same evening if you let them. Here is what a system does when it finally gets held accountable by its own rules. In flat, factual terms. Because I think the facts deserve to speak for themselves. The bank's internal fraud unit opened a formal investigation within 11 days and froze the remaining balance of the trust. All $18,600 of it. Pending review. Which meant my mother could no longer touch a single dollar of an account she had controlled for 7 years. The state's Financial Exploitation Division substantiated the case 4 months later, a finding that took the form of a written determination, stating that Diane Callahan had engaged in financial exploitation of a vulnerable beneficiary. A determination that became a matter of public record. And that, under the terms of her original court appointment as trustee, permanently disqualified her from ever serving as a fiduciary again. In that state, the document examiner's report on the forged signature was referred to the district attorney's office. And while I am not going to walk you through the ongoing legal proceedings in detail, because they are, as I write this, still moving through the courts, I can tell you that my mother has retained a defense attorney, which is not a sentence I ever expected to write about the woman who used to tell me not to make a scene. The contractor invoice for the ramp that never existed was referred separately, because falsifying receipts to justify a fraudulent withdrawal is its own charge. And the district attorney's office confirmed, in a letter I still have, that it was being reviewed alongside a larger case. And Dr. Osei. When I finally called her, 2 years after I'd stopped seeing her, to explain why I needed her clinic's billing records, was quiet for a moment, and then said, "I wondered why you disappeared. I am glad you are all right." I did not tell her everything. I told her enough. My mother has called 9 times since the meeting in that conference room. I have not answered any of them. Kayla has sent, by my count, 14 messages, none of them an apology. Most of them some version of, "You are tearing this family apart," as though the tearing began the day I opened a folder, and not the day a walker hit a driveway, or the day before that. I have not answered those either. Silence, I have learned, is not the same thing as cruelty. Sometimes it is just the only sentence left that is still entirely mine. I still have the walker. It sits in the corner of my apartment now, folded, next to a much newer one I actually use day to day. The kind with better suspension and a seat that folds down when my legs need a full rest instead of just support. I kept the old one for exactly one reason. And it is not sentimental in the way you might expect. That bent wheel guard, that long white scratch down the frame, ended up matched by a photograph forensic technician to a tire mark on my stepfather's truck. Time-stamped by the metadata on a photo I had taken of it the same week I left. Filed as supporting documentation in my own case. The most ordinary object in my entire life, a mobility aid my sister threw away like it meant nothing, became the one piece of physical evidence that independently corroborated the date I moved out. Which mattered, because my mother's attorney tried at one point to argue the withdrawals predated any breakdown in trust between us. The walker proved otherwise. The thing she threw to prove I did not matter is the thing that helped prove. In a court record, exactly when and why I stopped trusting her with anything at all. My mother used to say everything she did for my own good. I have come to understand that sentence differently now than I did in that kitchen. For my own good, I finally stopped waiting to be believed, and I built the belief myself, page by page, out of bank statements and photographs, and a scratched aluminum frame nobody thought was worth keeping. I did not get my family back. I want to say that plainly, because I think stories like this one owe you the truth instead of a bow on top. There was no tearful reconciliation. No moment where my mother finally saw me the way I'd spent 30 years hoping she would. What I got instead was smaller, and it turned out to be enough. I got my name back on my own accounts. I got a determination in writing from a state agency that had no reason to lie for me, saying that what happened to me was real. I got eventually my own accessible apartment, paid for with my own salary, with a doorway wide enough for whichever set of wheels I need on any given day. And I got one salvaged thread, which I did not expect. My stepfather's mother, my step-grandmother Louise, who I had always thought was simply quiet, called me 2 weeks after the case became public record within the family, and said she had known, for longer than she was proud of, that something was wrong, and that she was sorry she had not said anything sooner. She has called every Sunday since. We talk about nothing, mostly the weather, a recipe. It is the most honest relationship I have left in that family, and it started with an apology instead of a denial, which apparently was all it ever needed to take. If you have ever had to build your own proof that you mattered, out of paperwork instead of an apology, I hope you know there is nothing weak about that. It is, in my experience, the strongest thing a person can do. I still keep the old walker in the corner, not because I need it to get around anymore. Most days, I keep it because it is the only thing in that entire story that never once lied to me. If this was you, or if it is someone you love, tell me one word in the comments. I read every one.